Title: The Chop of Change. Chapter 1: The Weight of Tradition. Riya sat on the edge of her bed, running a wooden comb through her long, thick hair. It cascaded down her back like a river of midnight silk, reaching past her waist. Her family often praised her for it. Her mother called it a crown of beauty, and her grandmother swore it was a sign of good fortune. But to Riya, it felt like a weight, both literal and figurative. Living in Mumbai, the city of dreams, Riya had aspirations of her own. She wanted to break into the world of graphic design, creating art that would tell stories. But every time she voiced her ambitions, her family's response was the same: focus on finding a good match first. You can work after you're married. Her hair symbolized their expectations. It was what a proper Indian girl should look like: elegant, traditional, and poised. But Riya felt trapped in the image they had crafted for her. That evening, as she stared at her reflection in the mirror, she sighed. The strands of hair were beautiful, yes, but they felt alien, like they belonged to someone else. Chapter 2: Sparks of Change. A week later, Riya attended her college reunion. She had dressed modestly, as her mother had insisted, in a light blue salwar kameez. As she stepped into the bustling banquet hall, her heart raced with excitement and a hint of nervousness. Familiar faces turned to greet her, but her eyes searched for someone in particular. And then she saw her. Mira. Mira had always been bold and adventurous, but today she looked transformed. Her hair, now cut into a sleek bob, framed her face perfectly. It wasn't just the haircut that caught Riya's attention, it was the way Mira carried herself, with an air of effortless confidence and freedom that was almost magnetic. Mira! Riya exclaimed, rushing to greet her, her smile wide but tinged with disbelief. Riya! It's been so long. Mira said, pulling her into a warm, enthusiastic hug. Her laughter was as vibrant as her presence. You look amazing, Riya said, unable to take her eyes off Mira's haircut. Her fingers unconsciously reached up to touch her own hair. Your hair. It's so different. It's bold. Mira laughed lightly, her hand brushing through her bob. Yeah, I needed a change. Cutting it felt liberating, like shedding old baggage. It's not just a haircut, Riya, it's a statement. You should try it sometime. Riya's polite smile faltered for a moment as Mira's words sank in. Liberating, she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. You mean, cutting your hair made you feel free? Mira's gaze softened, sensing Riya's curiosity. It's more than that. It's about reclaiming myself. For years, I felt like I had to fit into a box others created for me. But one day, I asked myself, what do I really want? And this, she gestured to her hair. This is just the beginning. Riya nodded slowly, her thoughts spinning. The lively chatter of the reunion faded into the background as she stared at Mira, who looked so sure of herself. For the rest of the evening, Riya couldn't stop thinking about those words. Could something as simple as a haircut really be the key to freedom? Could it unlock a part of her that had been buried beneath years of expectations? By the time she returned home that night, the question had rooted itself deeply in her mind, refusing to let go. Chapter 3: Doubts and Resistance. The idea of cutting her hair lingered in Riya's thoughts like an unfinished melody, playing over and over. The following morning, as she sat in the kitchen with her family, she decided to test the waters. What do you think about shorter hair? She asked casually, breaking the comfortable silence of breakfast. Her voice was light, but her heart pounded. Her mother looked up sharply, her spoon pausing mid-air. Short hair? Why would you even think of that? She asked, her tone teetering between surprise and disapproval. I was just wondering, Riya said, keeping her gaze fixed on her plate. It might be easier to manage. Her grandmother, who was seated nearby, adjusted her glasses and frowned. No, Beta. Long hair is a woman's pride. It's a blessing from God. Why would you want to cut it? Riya's father, though silent, gave her a glance that carried both confusion and curiosity. The weight of their collective gaze felt suffocating, yet Riya tried to keep her composure. "It's just hair," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "It grows back." Her mother sighed, setting her spoon down. "Riya, people notice these things. What will others think if you walk around looking unfinished?" "Unfinished?" Riya repeated, her voice tinged with frustration. "It's a haircut, not a life decision." Her grandmother shook her head, her expression firm. "Long hair is what makes a woman graceful. Don't throw away your beauty, Beta." The conversation left Riya feeling deflated. As she cleared her plate and returned to her room, a storm of emotion swirled within her. Anger, frustration, and a tinge of guilt battled for dominance. Was she being selfish for wanting to let go of something her family held so dear? That evening, as she brushed her hair, her movements were slower, more deliberate. The strands felt heavier than ever, like chains tethering her to an identity she no longer recognized. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Why is this so hard?" she whispered to her reflection, her voice trembling. The girl staring back at her seemed lost, caught between two worlds, one of tradition and one of self-discovery. As the night deepened, Riya lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The voices of her family echoed in her mind, but so did Mira's. "Reclaim yourself," Mira had said. The words struck a chord, reverberating through her being. Maybe it's not just about the haircut, Riya thought, her fingers grazing the ends of her hair. Maybe it's about proving to myself that I can make my own choices. A quiet determination began to bloom within her. The doubts and resistance were still there, but beneath them, a small spark of courage had taken root. And Riya knew that soon, she would have to decide whether to let it grow. Chapter 4, The First Snip. The next day, Riya found herself standing outside a modern salon, the glass doors reflecting her hesitant figure. She'd been pacing for nearly 20 minutes, her nerves battling the quiet determination that had led her here. "It's just a haircut," she muttered under her breath, clutching her handbag tightly. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she took a deep breath and stepped inside. The salon was sleek and bustling, filled with the hum of blow dryers and the chatter of stylists. The faint scent of lavender and hair products filled the air. A receptionist greeted her warmly, but Riya's voice wavered as she said, "I'd like a haircut. Something shorter." A stylist named Tara soon approached her. Tara had short, vibrant hair, dyed a shade of electric blue. Her smile was welcoming, and her demeanor was calming. "What are we doing today?" she asked, leading Riya to a chair. Riya hesitated, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I want a change," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've had long hair my entire life, but I think I'm ready for something different." "Maybe a bob?" Tara nodded encouragingly. "A bob would look great on you." "Are you sure you're ready for the big chop?" Riya's eyes met Tara's in the mirror. She saw a flicker of doubt, but also a spark of determination. "Yes," she said firmly, surprising herself. "I'm ready." As Tara draped a cape over her shoulders, Riya's heart raced. She felt the weight of her hair as Tara gathered it into a loose ponytail. The moment felt surreal, like she was on the verge of something monumental. "Here we go," Tara said softly, holding a pair of gleaming scissors. With a decisive snip, the ponytail came free, and Riya felt an immediate lightness. Her breath caught, and a wave of emotion surged through her, relief, excitement, and a flicker of fear. Her eyes widened as she saw the thick bundle of hair in Tara's hands. It was gone. Just like that. Her chest tightened as she watched the transformation begin. As Tara continued cutting, Riya's mind raced. Memories of her childhood, of oiling and braiding her hair, of her mother's proud compliments, each one played like a montage. But with every snip, those memories felt lighter, less binding. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she said with a nervous laugh, her voice trembling. "You're doing great," Tara said, her tone steady and kind. "Trust the process. Change can be scary, but it's often worth it." Riya nodded, gripping the arms of the chair. As the scissors snipped rhythmically, she focused on the sound, letting it drown out her doubts. She began to feel a strange exhilaration, as though she were shedding not just her hair but layers of insecurity and hesitation. When Tara spun the chair around for the final reveal, Riya's breath hitched. Her bob was sleek and modern, framing her face in a way that accentuated her high cheekbones and sparkling eyes. She reached up tentatively, her fingers grazing the soft, feathered ends. "How do you feel?" Tara asked, her eyes twinkling. Riya stared at her reflection, her lips parting in awe. She felt different. Lighter. Freer. "I feel like myself," she whispered, her voice steady but filled with wonder. As she stepped out of the salon, the breeze playfully tousling her shorter hair, Riya couldn't help but laugh, a sound full of joy and triumph. She ran her fingers through her bob, marveling at the weightlessness, both inside and out. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just carrying the weight of tradition. She was embracing the freedom of choice, and it felt exhilarating. Chapter 5, Reactions and Revelations. As Riya walked home, her bob catching the late afternoon sunlight, she couldn't help but run her fingers through her hair repeatedly. The soft, feathered edges felt unfamiliar, yet exhilarating. The world seemed different, brighter, lighter. Every step felt deliberate, as though she were walking into a new chapter of her life. But as she approached her building, the fluttering excitement gave way to a creeping apprehension. Her family. What would they say? Her mother's disapproval and her grandmother's lectures echoed in her mind. She tried to steel herself, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. The moment she entered, her younger brother, Arjun, looked up from his phone. His jaw dropped, and he let out a low whistle. "Whoa, Riya. What happened to your hair?" She laughed nervously, brushing her fingers through her bob. "I got a haircut." "You like it?" "You look different," he said, still staring. "But in a good way." "Cool, even." Riya smiled, feeling a small wave of relief. At least Arjun didn't seem horrified. She set her bag down and walked into the living room, where her mother was folding laundry. Her grandmother sat on the sofa, engrossed in an old Bollywood movie. Her mother looked up, and the pile of neatly folded clothes nearly toppled. "Riya, what have you done?" she exclaimed, her voice sharp with shock. Her grandmother turned, her glasses slipping down her nose as she peered at Riya. Her expression morphed from confusion to dismay. "Hi Ram. What is this?" "Your beautiful hair. Why would you cut it?" Riya's heart thudded, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I wanted a change," she said simply. "It's my hair, and I thought it was time to try something new." Her mother's eyes narrowed. "A change? Riya, this isn't what good girls do. What will people say? What about when you meet a prospective groom? This is not how a proper Indian girl should look." Riya felt a familiar pang of guilt but quickly pushed it aside. "Mom, it's just hair," she said, her voice steady. "It doesn't define who I am or how proper I am." Her grandmother shook her head, muttering something about the younger generation and Western influences. But Riya's mother wasn't ready to let it go. "Riya, this is about more than just hair. It's about respect, about tradition. You know how much your grandmother values long hair. You've hurt her feelings." Riya's resolve wavered for a moment, but then Mira's words rang in her ears, "Reclaim yourself." She took a deep breath and spoke with quiet conviction. "I'm sorry if I've upset you, but this was something I needed to do for myself. My hair doesn't change who I am or the values you've instilled in me. It's a part of my journey to figure out who I want to be." Her mother opened her mouth to argue, but stopped, surprised by the firmness in Riya's tone. Her grandmother continued to grumble, but Riya could sense that even she was somewhat taken aback by her newfound confidence. Arjun, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "Honestly, I think it suits her. And isn't it more important that Riya feels good about herself?" Riya shot him a grateful glance. Her mother sighed heavily and shook her head. "I don't understand this new generation. But if this is what you want, I suppose there's nothing I can do about it." Her grandmother huffed but said nothing more, turning back to the movie with a disgruntled expression. Riya felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She knew not everyone would accept her decision right away, but she had stood her ground. For the first time, she felt like she had taken control of her own narrative. Later that night, as she sat by her window, the cool breeze ruffling her hair, Riya reflected on the day. She had feared the confrontation, but in facing it, she had discovered something profound, strength she didn't know she had. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mira. "So, did you do it?" Riya smiled and typed back, "I did. And you were right. It feels amazing." Mira's reply came almost instantly, "Welcome to the club, girl. Proud of you." As Riya set her phone down, she glanced at her reflection in the window. The girl staring back at her looked the same yet entirely different. She looked like someone ready to take on the world, on her own terms. Chapter 6, The Turning Point. Riya paced back and forth in her room, her fingers nervously brushing through her hair, now a bit shorter but still holding on to the familiar weight. It had been a few days since the haircut, and while she had felt liberated in the salon, the after-effects were more complicated than she had anticipated. The reactions at home weighed heavily on her heart, and the sense of judgment lingered like a shadow. Her mother had been silent at first, almost as if processing the shock, but then her disapproval had come crashing through like a storm. "What will people think?" she had asked, her voice tight with worry. "This isn't how a proper girl looks, Riya. Not when you're trying to make a good impression." Riya had stood her ground then, repeating the same words she had said earlier, but the discomfort had stayed with her. She had seen the disappointment in her mother's eyes, the tightness in her grandmother's face, and a part of her, the part that still craved their approval, had faltered. But each morning as she stared at herself in the mirror, Riya saw something different. It wasn't the reflection of a girl who had disappointed her family. It was the reflection of someone finally ready to take control of her own life. She was starting to see the girl who had always wanted to break free but never quite had the courage to do so. That afternoon, Riya found herself on her balcony, staring out at the city below. The wind tousled her hair, and for the first time in days, she felt at peace. It wasn't just the haircut, it was the act of doing something for herself. As the days went by, Riya's resolve strengthened. She continued with her graphic design projects, diving deeper into her passion and discovering a sense of freedom in her creativity that had been stifled for too long. But the most significant change wasn't just in the work she was producing, it was in her attitude. She was no longer just going through the motions. She was living her life on her terms, embracing her own choices, no matter how small they seemed. One evening, as Riya sat at her desk sketching out designs, her phone buzzed with a message from Mira. "How's the new look? Did you survive the family interrogation?" Riya smiled, typing back, "I'm surviving, but I think they're starting to get it. The haircut wasn't just about the hair." Mira's reply came almost immediately, "I knew it. It's about embracing who you are. Proud of you, girl." Riya sat back in her chair, looking around her room, her heart full. She had stood up for herself in a way she hadn't thought possible. The doubts and fears that had once held her back were now mere echoes, fading away. She glanced at her reflection in the window, running her fingers through her bob, the once heavy locks now light and free. She had made the choice to shed the weight of expectations, and it felt like she was finally breathing again. The phone buzzed again, but this time it was a message from her mother. "I've been thinking about your haircut, Riya. Maybe it wasn't such a bad thing after all." Riya's heart skipped a beat. She read the message again, a sense of relief washing over her. Her mother wasn't entirely on board yet, but this was progress. Riya quickly typed back, "Thank you, Mom. It means a lot to me." As she set the phone down and looked out at the city, Riya realized that the haircut was more than just a change in appearance. It was a turning point, a moment that had pushed her to confront her fears and to make a choice that would shape the rest of her life. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the path she was meant to walk. And the journey, Riya knew, had only just begun.